Hey everyone, it's Public, and today we're going to be looking at another tool to help you in your, not just your raiding, but just see how your character is doing and improve yourself as a raider. And that tool is Simcraft. And there's a lot of different components and pieces to this guy, so I'm going to do my best to kind of break these down. The essential part of Simcraft and what it does and how it helps you is that it essentially simulates a raid setting to kind of see how your players should do at a certain level, whether that be like without zero errors, no mistakes, none of that stuff, like perfect, or like you're really, really bad, or all, it can try to do that kind of stuff. With a big old caveat of here saying none of this is always going to be 100% accurate, but it helps you get a better idea of where to go, or what you to aim for, or like for instance, if you think one piece or one trinket is better than another one, you can use this tool to see which one theoretically performs better in the closed encounter setting. So to get started, what you want to do is go to simulationcraft.org, and you can actually see they have a rankings list that they publish here, so you can see that feral druids are apparently simming the best on single target patchwork, which is okay information. You kind of always want to take this with a grain of salt because most raid encounters aren't just a one boss thing. Usually there are ads coming in or different phases modify what you do, or if ads come in, then some people are really high, some people might go lower. There's a lot of different variables, so this is looking at a perfect scenario with just one target and no mechanics. So again, best case scenario, which isn't always super accurate. But this is a really cool tool to see, like, hey, which talents are doing better or which trinkets are doing better, like I said. So what you can do is, once you are on the home page, you can go under the Downloads tab and download the proper version for your operating system. Works for Mac, Linux, or actually, I think they're working on Linux, but Mac and Windows for sure. And once you have it downloaded, you're going to get a screen that looks something like this, which is what you want to see. And just to kind of show you like a routine way of how to start, so if you go over to this import tab, you go ahead and find your realm and then type in your character name. Now this import is kind of a double-edged sword. Right now, WoW, and kind of in the past as well, Blizzard has issues with their WoW Armory API, which is how this is pulling your character's data. So you can see here, if you scroll down here, you can see, okay, this is all the gear that I'm wearing. But for instance, on live, let's say that I actually am wearing a different trinket. Well, the armory might not have updated, so it might not have that. So kind of a way to counter that. Oops, let's get out of that. So instead of doing this import stuff, what you can do is, if you go to Simulation Craft Curse add-on, you can actually go to Curse and download this Simulation Craft add-on. And once you have it downloaded and installed in the game, you can type in /simc, and this will pull up. It'll open up your artifact, and it'll essentially copy everything that your character is wearing at that specific moment. Give this nice long thing right here. What you want to do is you want to take everything you see here up to artifact, and you want to copy that for your records. And then you can actually use that and put that into Simulation Craft instead. So instead of, so if we go back to this import guy, instead of using this default, everything else I have, we can go ahead and paste that in. Now something to note as well, with Legion, the WoW Armory actually hasn't updated, so you can't see what artifact traits you have on the Armory. So as you saw before, this artifact line wasn't in here at all. The game actually doesn't know, the sim doesn't know that you have one unless you tell it. So this is really important to get a good feel, so I recommend you downloading the add-on just to get that exact thing anyway. I wish I could tell you what all these numbers mean after artifact or how to calculate it. I'm assuming it has some combination of 0 means you have 0 traits in it, but I'm not sure if these are the spell IDs or exactly how that is calculated or what the number at the end means. So it's all kind of jumbled up for me, but there you go. And then what you can do is here, under the options tab, you can set kind of your basic options that you want to do. So for sake of time, I'm just going to say fight length of 120 seconds, which is like a mythic dungeon boss. And you have different fight styles here, so I'll kind of explain these real quick. Patchwork is, again, like I said, single target, no ads, nothing else happening. Hectic ad cleave is essentially there are ads out the entire time for you to to do damage with. Um, Helter Skelter, I honestly don't know what this one does, and I've never used it, so there you go. Ultraxion is modeled directly off of the Ultraxion boss in Dragon Soul. Doesn't have a whole lot of use, in my opinion, but it's similar to Patchwork in a lot of ways. They also have light movement, heavy movement fights where essentially they're throwing uh, like a mechanic that you have to move or something, and the light versus heavy is the interval of how often that's happening. So the light movement is kind of like a more simulated version of a fight, like a real fight, because you usually have some mechanic where you have to move for a certain period of time. And then the Beast Lord encounter, which is proving to become increasingly popular, like Shadow Lord Iskar was very similar to, where essentially you would DPS one target for a certain amount of time, and then after like 60 seconds or so, ads would come out. Generally speaking, it's a better idea to start with only doing the patchwork style, and then after you have a good baseline, then you can kind of go from there. You can also do different number of enemies if you want to simulate like what a council fight would be like. And generally speaking, you want to leave the rest of these where they are. You can change the target race. Generally speaking, humanoid's going to give you the best baseline, but for some classes or some trinkets, especially like the heirloom trinkets that we saw from the WoD Mythic dungeons, you do more damage versus demons. So you might want to see what that actually looks like on a demon boss. For our sake, we'll leave that as humanoid for now. And then over here, you can, under the advanced options tab, you can essentially have it say how much you want to push your computer during this sim, because it will destroy it if you want it to. I mean, it will use 100% of your CPU if you think it's necessary. And then world lag, you can do that as well. Generally speaking, leave it at 100, it's fine. And then that's pretty much all you have to really do. We have our tab selected, so we can go ahead and hit simulate. It's using the talents that I had from the armory, and yeah, there you go. You get a nice, that's my DPS for this, and then you get a huge breakdown of how that's working and things like that. So this inherently by itself is valuable, but for instance, you usually want to make some kind of comparison here. So whether that's like, well, level 15 talents, what's the big difference here? If I took something different, what would my DPS look like? So you could just, go in the game, change your talents, change your gear, and then do /simc and get a new export string again. Or something that I've done to kind of help people save a lot of time in this, and this link will be in the description of the video. I've actually done my best to create automation talent lines, essentially. So because I'm familiar with Shadow Priest, let's try them. So I have these automation.txt files, and it has all these talent combinations for that class. At least the ones according to the guides that I found that were viable for some situation where there's AoE, single target, or whatever. So for instance, let's take all of the Surrender to Madness talent sims, which in this case is the last row in the Shadow Priest talent tree. And in this import tab, instead of doing the normal realm character, if you go to this automation tab, and I can select a comparison type of talents, I can paste in that big long string that you can see there. And this essentially is going to generate a new sim for each one of these and then kind of put them together side by side. So we can finish configuring this. This will be for a priest, shadow, blood elf is fine. Change that default level to 110. And then we can come back here like we did before, and we can just leave my gear the same. So again, we'll do the same thing, copy up to artifact, and we'll come back, and we have this default gear tab. We can just paste that in. Make sure you have that artifact line in there as well, otherwise that won't carry over. And then as far as default rotation goes, if you've never used Simcraft before, you pretty much just want to leave this blank. This is usually thousands of lines long, depending on how, hundreds of lines long, depending on how complicated the class is. They have default profiles made for every class. That's how you saw this list getting generated. All of these have default lists, and if you actually want to see them, you can either go to the GitHub or on this actual guy. This is the actual rotation list that it's doing. So not terribly long, but definitely not something that a beginner or even intermediate user needs to mess with. I mean, this is a lot of math and theory crafty stuff, so you don't need to mess with that if you don't feel confident. No worries there. So back to this guy, we'll just leave everything default, and then what we can do then is hit import. You see it made a whole new tab here, and now this thing got super long. So essentially it generated all of this for me. And what I can do here, just for sake of time, we'll go ahead and change that, not 600, that would be crazy. We'll make it 60 seconds, there you go. Yeah, we'll leave it patchwork, leave all that the same. And then you can also like rename this if you want. So I'll say public Surrender to Madness, and this is a 60-second sim. And then you can go ahead and hit simulate. And what this is going to do is essentially run through each one of these one by one, and then give you a massive comparison of all of these guys. So for sake of time, while that thing is running, again, I'll kind of go over in this GitHub. I've tried my best to essentially compile these automation.txt files for every class and spec. So you see that I have one for Feral, not a whole lot that changes their DPS on those guys, at least what's viable. And each one of these also has a default artifact as well. This is, I believe, the maxed out artifact for that class, or at least as close to it as I can. This is exactly what you find on the Simcraft website right here. So I just copy and pasted that for every class. In general, you want to import this from the add-on to get it tailored to you and the path that you chose on your artifact. And again, just like we did before on the Shadow Priest, you just do the exact same thing I did here. And if you want to take it a step further, you can also do gear as well, or you can do in this example, if I want to change trinkets, I could have named this with the trinkets I had, and then come back into the game, and then if I say equip this trinket instead, and then do /simc, and then I have that new trinket 1 right there, and I can, come back in here, go back to the import, change what trinket 1 is, and then hit import again, and now I have a second guy, and I can run that again. And so you can kind of keep playing around with this, and eventually you'll end up with your results. And I've kind of, a lot easier for my guildies and stuff as well. You can see some of them are already in here. So, for example, I did myself 120-second fight with different trinket builds. So Horn Obelisk using Mind Spike on a 2-minute fight. And these are actually really, really huge text files, but at the end it gives you something really similar to this, where you get essentially the DPS output and then all this other stuff at the bottom. If you're interested in that, it's the same stuff, just not in the nice HTML version that you see here. So yeah, and then I can kind of say, okay, well, on average, Shadowward Void tended to pull a bev on a 120-second fight with Mind Spike, and I kind of have these talent builds that I've crafted out. And you can also kind of see, like, okay, well, that was better, but in practice, I think Twist of Fate is still better, and I'm only really losing between, like, 1k DPS, but I know Twist of Fate pulls ahead on X scenario. So you kind of, again, you don't want to take these super to heart, because they're not always going to be 100% accurate, but it's kind of saying, again, best case scenario, this is what things should be looking like. So you kind of infer things from there. So this has kind of gone long far enough, so I'll go ahead and hit cancel. It's not doing the whole list, but you can kind of get the idea. Once it's done here, it's going to essentially compile everything together and then give you that nice pretty thing in your results. So this is just the first one we did. Let's edit finish here. And yeah, you can continue to do this, and I think in general it's helpful for any raider to do this, to kind of see baseline where they're at, where talents stack up with each other, because especially early on, guides are kind of sparse because they haven't experienced it themselves, and it's hard to, go over too much. So you can see this is kind of the results. It only did 1,000 iterations, which is like 1/10 of what I asked it to do. So yeah, you can kind of see, okay, this is where things started to stack up. Obviously, it didn't totally complete, but yeah. So this is kind of giving me a baseline of what things look like on a 60-second fight. And again, you can drill down further from here. You get the same thing you did before, but now we're comparing all these different talent setups with each other, not just what I had equipped at the time. So this is a really powerful tool to essentially mass automate all of these sims at once, as opposed to doing them one by one. And you can see, I mean, that took a total of maybe a couple minutes just to get that set up and get this import tab working. After that, it's pretty much off to the races from there. So. And like I said, I'll include this GitHub link in the description. Some of these might be kind of weird, like for instance, Survival Hunter. According to the guide on Icy Veins written by Azathorian, like there are only two viable options here. So like there are some of these guys where it's like, I'm just going off what the guide says, and there are also other ones like Unholy Death Knight where there are just a lot. So yeah, kind of take it with a grain of salt. The longer these guys are, it might hinder how fast the sim will actually run itself. But it's definitely something you can tailor yourself. This pattern of listing out the numbers of the talents and then the name is just something anyone can do. It's pretty straightforward. You just gotta one for the first row, two for the second row, three for the third row, and then kind of go from there. So yeah, I hope this guys helps anyone in their constant effort to try and get better. And like I said, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time.